Hello and welcome to Scientifically Speaking. Today's video is a theory based upon double helix energy flow and basically everything I've said about energy and DNA. I've said that DNA is an energy activated electrical frequency code. Electricity reads the code, electricity activates the code, and the code is displayed as a magnetic 3D image because it is magnetism that gives inflation and rotation and 3 dimensions. Electricity is for binding and activating the DNA code. You see, God hides things in size. One massive EM shape is concealed in one tiny DNA strand. You only need a DNA strand, let's say just for cloning, let's just say. That one strand will become a sheep. That's massive. So God always hides things in size. Just for an example, natural gas expands to 600 times its size when combusted. That means when you apply a spark to natural gas, I've said flames are an electromagnetic flare, so it expands 600 times, but is because it is converted from electricity through the atoms into an electromagnetic 3-dimensional flare shape. And that's why natural gas expands to 600 times its size when combusted, because it is being given electricity. And so it displays itself as a magnetic flame signal. And the DNA shape to body size. You can't even see your DNA. And yet your body appears literally from nowhere. God hides things in size, and the energy, electricity, reads the code, activates the code, and magnetism is the code displayed as a 3D image. So, with that being said, what are we looking at today? Today we are looking at rapid adaptation evolution. You see, evolution has always been taught as something that happens over millions of years for some small specific reason, so some bird can have bigger wings or a bigger beak. Proponents of an electric plasma universe understand that energy shapes the environment. In fact, I even made a video. Let's go have a look at it now. I made this video called Evolution Deep Time Falsified by Double Helix Energy Flow. And basically, within this video, I show many explanations of the human body and the construction of the planet and anything that's on the planet. Just got to have an advert, right? Slap in the centre, don't you? And basically this video showed that it is nothing to do with time for adaptation or evolution to take place. It is based on energy content, either high energy content or low. I also explained this in my very first video that all energy in the universe is going into entropy due to the fact that we used to have, trees that were like 2 miles high, massive animals. Everything is getting smaller. That means smaller energy content. Tell me why there aren't 2-mile trees anymore. It's not because of gravity. It's not because of climate. It's because of the energy content within the planet. Our atmosphere is affected by the sun's EM force. And if that goes up or down, changes will happen in our atmosphere. It will either expand or it will contract. So this whole video is all about energy flow creating shape. So I've already falsified evolution through energy flow. Now we're going to find out why it's happening, and then we're going to go to the Shuman frequency and we're going to discuss that, which is kind of awesome. I've got a video called My Crystal Mind, and I explain in it how the Holy Spirit lit me up so much that I realized that if I closed my eyes I could look up and see every single thought, every single fact, every single piece of information above me like a crystal rooms stacked one behind another. And I said that every single door led to every other door, which means everything is relatable and everything is explainable. So here we are at rapid adaptation evolution. Let's have a listen to Ben Davidson and what he's got to say about it, and what's been happening, and why supposed evolution is now actually observable. It's no longer a million-year process. Suddenly, it's becoming observable that animals are changing.
A nod to the approximately 20 stories we've covered in the last decade, where scientists are baffled at how quickly animals are evolving or adapting to our changing world. As we have seen suggested before, the stresses trigger these types of changes, not to mention the changing geomagnetic field and cosmic ray bombardment profile of every living thing on Earth right now.
Yeah, so it's the electromagnetic changes that seem to be causing evolution adaptation.
Yes, we are, Monkey. Up next.
So, we're now seeing evolution adaptation on a much faster scale. But we also know the electromagnetic field of our sun is changing. It has changed colour from yellow to white. This means it's getting it's getting more energy than it should have. Or there's about 10 different reasons. The sun could be depositing matter upon the surface of itself, and so it becomes clogged, as it were, and so it has to heat up more. Eventually it'll go bang. So, but we know that something's happening with the sun, and we're also seeing with the sun and its electromagnetic field and our electromagnetic field, which is dropping like a stone. You can go watch Suspicious Observers here for any information you want on the collapse of the EM field strength. So they're seeing changes, but we also know that the science is seeing changes in the system we are in. Okay, so we know evolution is being observed. We also know the EM field of the planet and the sun are changing. So there has to be a correlation, because nothing else is changing. The weather is changing because the atmosphere is changing, because the EM field is changing, because the sun's output is changing. So to see observable adaptation and observable evolution in such a short scale time, also noting that the sun is doing something over this short period of time, there have to be a correlation. So now we're going to go to the Shuman Resonance with Michael Clarage. Now, Michael and I, we've corresponded a couple of times by email. I wouldn't say we're friends, but I would say that we could sit down, have a beer and a good chat about the electric universe and double helix energy flow, which is why Michael contacted me in the first place, to discuss a few things about that. I like Michael's work. I think it's brilliant. So I've brought it to the part here. I was going to go through this whole video, and I was going to do a response to this video, Michael Clarage, The Light of Life, Thunderbolts. I was going to review the whole thing because he says some amazing things in this video. I will link this video and the Suspicious Observers video underneath in the description box, so you can watch the entire thing, because this Thunderbolts video is well worth watching. But I've brought us up to where they're doing experiments with the Shuman Resonance, with DNA. Now, the Shuman resonance has been spiking. The Shuman resonance is to do with your alpha waves in your brain. And if the Shuman goes off, terrible things happen to people and animals and everything, really. We're going to find out a little bit more about that now, as to why it would happen. Because everybody has to remember, we are in an electromagnetic system. We are in a sea of energy. Your body is a closed system that is attached to an open system, the atmosphere and the planet. So it's all to do with the Shuman resonance, as I'm about to theorize and try and explain my thoughts on this. Because we've also, literally just correlated that there's changes happening to the sun and our own magnetic field, and suddenly evolution adaptation is observable. So we know anybody with a logic brain who actually understands science should know that when there's a correlation, there's normally a connection. We're going to find out what the connection is here, and then I'm going to give my further thoughts on what's going to happen due to the same thing happening thousands of years ago. This has happened several times. We're going to find out what I think about it. So let's have a listen to Michael. Might take you a few seconds to get up to speed, but we will get into a DNA experiment where they transmit a signal of DNA that was put in water, has been removed. They transmit the signal to another place, and then they put that signal into a glass tube and drop in DNA components. I wonder what happens. Let's go.
In some cells. With this picture of interconnection up and down the ladder, we now widen our view and look further up the scale. If a large number of people are engaged in unhealthy activity, this must work its way up to cause ill health in whatever larger groupings exist, be they families or countries or even all life on Earth taken all together. Going the other way, if we can imagine it, if there were something gone wrong at a planetary level, then this must find its way down to humanity. Not necessarily to make each person sick, but certainly cause changing trends of illness that appear and disappear across the globe.
Now, I've said in the past on video that the lowering of the EM field will take away energy from one life form and give it to another. And I've said that's where pestilence from God is going to come from, is due to the lowering of a field. And so energy, let's just say as an easy example, energy from humans is now going to a virus instead of the other way around. So viruses are becoming not stronger, but more populous due to their being fed the right food. Keep going.
Our ladder now stretches from the entire Earth down to individual photons. And we are ready for my number one favorite experiment involving the biophotons of DNA. The lab of Luc Montagnier was studying radio frequencies emitted by DNA. In the last of a series of truly boggling experiments, they placed a string of DNA into a vial of water and stimulated the vial with various radio frequencies. Then filter out the DNA. This leaves just water. But the water is now emitting radio frequencies, which it somehow got from the DNA. Place an antenna around the vial of water and send that signal to a second lab several miles away. In this other lab, you have a second test tube that contains water and all the individual building blocks of DNA.
Now, notice there is no creation of DNA here. The individual building blocks of DNA are contained in the water. What's about to happen does not create DNA. It's going to do something else.
Broadcast our signal into the second vial. In a few hours, the original DNA strand will be constructed in the second vial. Sounds like magic, and I guess it is, but it is also experimental data. Water can hold the radio frequency signal, which can be used to rebuild the DNA sequence from raw materials. I would hope that entire new research labs will be set up to further explore these results. Luc Montagnier has many admirers and many enemies, as often happens with people who achieve a great deal in life. Shortly before his death last year, he had the distinction of being canceled for daring to point out some obvious problems with a novel medical treatment that was being rolled out around the world. Hence, it is possible that anything connected with him will be erased from future history. What frequencies worked best in this experiment? The results were clearest when the initial strand was energized with 7 Hertz, 14 Hertz, or 28 Hertz radio signal. Of course, these are the resonant frequencies of the entire electrical body of the Earth. known as the Shuman Resonances. That is worth saying a second time. The entire electrical body of the Earth vibrates loudest at 7, 14, and 28 hertz. These are the same frequencies that allowed DNA in the experiment to best convey its information through water to rebuild itself.
Now that brings up many things. We're made of water, so the Schumann frequency is rebuilding DNA inside you right now. Think about that. So perhaps it's not part of the body's defense system. It's part of the Schumann frequency that's holding us all together, which means if it was, trying to explain this correctly, not massively higher, but if it was massively higher, your DNA would constantly be repaired at an unending rate. And so you would never die if you had enough energy. Now, God says you'll never die around him. That's what God says. Things live forever around God because the frequencies he's given out are constantly rebuilding life. So, there's another fantastic question. Is our DNA repaired by our own body, or is it rebuilt due to the frequencies of the sea of energy we are in our atmosphere? Now, the one question I did have for Michael, which I don't believe is on here, is does it rearrange it into the correct sequence? Because that would be awesome, wouldn't it? I would assume so, due to the radio frequencies being re-emitted from the water. But I'm loving this part about DNA will rebuild itself using all of the Schumann frequencies, 7, 14 and 28. Not just 7, but all of them. So, again, that's words from God coming true, that being around God you live forever, because the frequencies coming from him will rebuild you. That's why the dead will be dead forever, and those being punished, let's just say in the flames, they will keep getting rebuilt. I said this in one of my past videos. I said, you will keep regenerating in front of God. That's why the angels are to be burned. Because if you're around God, you can't die. Funny that. And now we find the best way to convey its information through water to rebuild itself by the Shuman resonance allows DNA to rebuild itself. So that's the question for the sciences now. Is it our human body that repairs itself, repairs its DNA? Or is it just a Schumann frequency? So then again, we say take away the Schumann frequency, we're all going to drop to bits.
It is absurd to think this is an accident. This obvious connection between the electrical body of the Earth and the DNA in each of us makes me quiet.
Perhaps Michael has also said to himself, we're not even doing anything. Our bodies are being held together by the holding pattern frequency of the Shuman resonance.
Like I sometimes get quiet in church or in an overwhelmingly beautiful landscape.
Not sure where Michael's going here, but I've got to say my bit, otherwise I'll end up forgetting it. So if the Shuman resonance holds all DNA where it should be, if the sun's energy changes and our energy changes, the Schumann energy will change. And so what will happen to DNA? Let's say the Schumann frequency drops. It will no longer activate all the DNA. So what's a cat going to look like when there's an electromagnetic crash? When it then starts off low and has to build up, which is historically proven, the sun will go bang, a micronova will happen, the sun will literally go out, and then it takes years for it to get back to the strength that we know now. It could take anywhere between 2,000 and 6,000 years to get back to where we are now, but it won't, because there's entropy in the universe, so energy is constantly disappearing into the void. So the thing that will happen to DNA is a cat will have a baby. It ain't going to look much like a cat though. Same with dogs and horses and people. They will start producing less energy electrified DNA offspring. And so that offspring, let's say, won't look like a cat no more. It will look like a deformed cat. And from what I've seen through history, we seem to breed the best DNA. As if All this happened before, and we ended up with a load of mangled animals. Not mangled, but not right. And so they bred the pairs that had the least DNA damage or the best DNA traits that were in the healthiest animals. And that again would go along with a conspiracy political theory to keep us all down. That pretending that it's survival of the fittest, when in fact it's just breeding things back to the reality we know. Because if the Shuman changes, the holding pattern for DNA will change. Different DNA will be activated. A cat will always be a cat, but the next time you see it, somebody might call it a rat. Or it's some weird looking cat from Egyptian style. I mean, we've all seen dogs. And we've all seen the different styles of dogs. These are all different displays of a DNA characteristic. All of that will get wiped out. And we will have a different set of dogs. Different set of hooves, different claws, different eyes. That's what will happen to your DNA if the Shuman resonance actually is the holding pattern for DNA and is what rebuilds DNA. I'm just about done with the things I've got to say. I wonder if Michael's got anything more.
At this point, poetry meets experimental science. The bridge between the two seems long, but is also undeniable. Antennas work both ways. The entire electrical body of the Earth is both the sender and the receiver of all the vibrations in all the DNA, in all the living creatures, over all the eons that have unfolded within her. Inside you are 1 trillion antennae that are both the senders and receivers of all the love and wisdom contained in the long body of our Mother Earth. This would be enough, but we're not done yet. In simple physics, the length of an antenna is comparable to the size of the wave it absorbs and emits. The AM radio antenna on your car is 1/4 the size of the AM radio waves that are being sent out from the radio stations. Since we have already verified experimentally that our DNA is an antenna that both absorbs and emits, we might ask, what is the length of our DNA, and is there any station broadcasting that wavelength? The DNA in one of your cells unrolls to roughly your own height. That's a notable connection. An organism the size of a person needs an antenna roughly its own size to adequately send and receive all the information required for an entire life from conception to death. But what about the combined length of all the DNA in all your cells? That combined length is the size of our entire solar system. We have within us antennas whose combined length happens to be the right size to resonate with the entire body of the sun, the planets, all the comets, even out to the heliopause. Who could believe such a thing? How could there be a connection with the life of a person in the entire solar system? Yet the connection must be there, because the ladder is unbroken. Whether or not any one of us can knowingly receive these signals, or is capable of intentionally broadcasting up to the whole solar system, it's a good question. I dare say it's a very important question.
See, that's made me go quiet. Because I've been opened up to all of it. The funny thing again, though, is DNA has a pile of junk DNA. A pile of antennas that are not working. Think about that for a second compared to what I've just said about everything. Piles of junk DNA that should allow us to connect to everything. The amount of antennas we have to emit and receive. Which again comes down to the fact that God is doing everything for you. This is why it says thank God. And people are like, what do I have to thank God for? The fact that all your DNA is being held together and you didn't even know it. I didn't know it. That was a new one for me. So again, we come back down to junk DNA. I said it was inactive DNA. There wasn't enough energy to activate that DNA. And Lord knows what will happen when that happens. So there we go. Oh, we're finishing on there. So there we go. The synopsis, the summary of this video is that the Shuman Resonance is keeping everybody alive, which of course all energy comes from God. And if the Shuman changes, that's when adaptation and evolution happen. Because it's not a million-year thing, and it's nothing to do with the thought and thinking of climate change people. It's nothing to do with that. It's to do with the electrical magnetic content of our solar system, of our sun, of our earth, that demonstrates the Shuman resonance in action. And now we have been shown that it actually rebuilds DNA. So your body actually isn't even doing that. So to sit there and say God doesn't do anything for you is a joke. God keeps us alive and well. And our turning away from God, well, the universe is in entropy, so energy is always going down, so we will end up in quite the disheveled shape again. It's happened before. Neanderthals and any other style of human you want to bring up as if it was some sort of evolutionary tactic, and yet we find out that Neanderthals and modern humans were living together and interbreeding, and that of course was to take their genetic code and use it, because these people had been outside in the radiation after the last fall, while all the normal humans, governments and rich people were holed up inside million people mountains, of which there are many around the earth in several different countries. Million people can sit in them, and they've been there for 6,000 years. So all of this is happening again. There's nothing about breeding the fittest. There's nothing about breeding traits in. It's all to do with getting rid of the traits that we ended up with after the last Shuman crash. Thanks very much. My name is Lee. I follow the Christ, and he allows me to link things together to explain it simply. You should follow God because he does everything for you every single day and keeps you alive every single day. And to even wake up and not thank God for being alive is a sin. Thanks a lot.